5 random devs create a game based off the theme Can't Stop Moving. But there's a twist. Each new developer joins the growing team and can communicate with everyone who came before. But once you pass on the project, you are permanently locked out of development. Let's jump right into the action with dev number 1.
Hello there, this is Chadderbox, and I make programming videos here on YouTube. And as soon as I heard that I was going to be the first developer on this challenge, I had one goal. I don't want all the other developers to hate me. Being the first developer, I create the foundations that all the other developers have to build off, and I really want to make them solid so they can spend their time working on fun stuff. My aim here is to create something small and basic, a bit like me, that hopefully can be expanded and iterated on by the rest of the talented team coming after me. And it really doesn't help that I don't have too much time for this challenge, so I've got to try and maximise the impact I can have here. With that said, it was time to get started on the game. The theme was Can't Stop Moving, and I think you can interpret that in a lot of different ways. To me, the first thing that springs to mind with that theme is an endless runner, but I didn't think that would give the future devs much to work with, and we all know you can't improve on the perfection the world already has in the form of Subway Surfers. So I went back to the drawing board. Not being able to stop moving is a very interesting constraint to work around, something I thought would work really well in a puzzle game. And at that point, I had my idea. The game was going to be a puzzle game where the player had to plot a route to the finish, avoiding obstacles while also ensuring that they don't stop moving. Hopefully, each dev after me can add more puzzle elements, and at some point, we end up with some sort of Rube Goldberg machine that provides entertaining gameplay. That's a bit ambitious at the moment though, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get anywhere near that level of complexity with the time I've got. But let's see what I can do. I cracked open Unity for the first time in a while, and did the usual fiddling that you do when starting a project. You know, configuring input and moving stuff around. But thankfully that was a bit easier because Lazy sent me a nice template, which sorted out a load of stuff for me. Now I had that done, the first thing I wanted to get working was a basic system to allow the player to place elements in the level. And this is a lot easier said than done if you want something extensible that works well. I decided I'd use Unity's scriptable object system to store data about various items that can be placed in the scene, and when combined with some handy editor tools, I hope that allows the other developers to easily add items as well later. Then, I wrote some code that uses that data to actually place items in the level, ensuring there's nothing beneath it. This started being very basic initially, just allowing the user to place down squares in the scene, but I slowly advanced it to ramps, and then finally interactive objects, like a player character. Now, the player character doesn't do very much, they just kind of roll around, but importantly, they do have some logic attached to them that allows them to see if they've stopped moving, or if they're in a special finish zone, which allows us to have a win and a lose state. Well, there would be a win and a lose state, if you could actually play the game, but I hadn't implemented the ability to switch from editing a level to playing the game yet, so that seemed sensible to work on next. Fortunately, that was pretty simple. It just hides a copy of the level to switch back to once the level's ended. Now, the game's almost playable, but there's nothing to play, which meant we needed levels. I quickly added some developer-only items to the level editor, and this meant I could make the game's levels from inside the game itself, which was pretty neat. At this point, I was running out of time, so I quickly created 2 example levels, so the next developer could get a sense of where I was going with this. While I was doing that, I had the idea that there could be multiple players, which I thought could lead to some pretty interesting gameplay, so I made sure I had a level that demonstrated this idea. I'm excited to see where the next dev goes with this. If I had to rate the game myself, at the moment, I'd give it a solid 2 with potential. So, let's see what the next dev can do.
Thank you to Octobrowser for supporting the series. Every website sees you through your own unique digital fingerprint. Information about your GPU, CPU, system languages, IP addresses, and whether you have microphones or speakers makes it possible to determine that you are you, even if you're using a VPN or incognito mode. Octobrowser spoofs your fingerprint and allows you to create multiple different digital identities that websites will see as separate devices. This makes it possible to safely manage multiple accounts, launch ad campaigns, farm airdrops, and remain anonymous amongst other users. Mysterious anomalies are happening this Halloween. A long-abandoned website has appeared online, rumored to have been created by an Octobrowser developer who vanished years ago. And the bravest amongst you will have the chance to win 1,000 USDT. To do this, you'll need to beat the Haunted Slot Machine. Visit haunted.octobrowser.net or click the link in the description to grab your 30 days of free access.
Hi, we're CozyCoupleCoding and we're the second developers.
Thank you, Lazy, for having us again. I'm the developer and she's the artist. So the first thing that I did was noticing that this is a game that has levels, and I wanted to make it easier for future developers who need to create these levels. So that's why I created an editor script. You can easily just click on tools and find the script that I created, and it will create a level automatically from a template. Then at this stage there weren't so many bugs, that's why I added some animations to the game, and we added gravitational zones, which sometimes during the level you find the different color of the map, and there your player, so the ball, gets different gravitational effect on it, and it can go up or down. A victory thing that tells you how long you need to stay in the victory area. And yeah, it's always amazing to work with Lazy's templates. Charlie, my fiance, has been doing some art in the background.
So basically, when it was my part of coming up with a visual language for this game, it was a bit of a struggle because I realized that I wanted to focus a bunch on the material, on the fact that it was gravitational. So I wanted it to be quite realistic and like focus on textures and real life materials. So I wanted to go for like an industrial direction, so metal blocks that had different types of design, very sci-fi, and that was kind of the direction I was going for. But I was also not having the best week of inspiration, and I do not think that it was the best thing that I've done. For the background, I thought of like pipes and like a grayish industrial background with like, I don't know, a city or another detailed with screws or something, but I didn't get to do that just yet. What I did try to do was leave some potential cubes to use for the next developers, and that was mostly my part.
So we added a few more levels, and for the cherry on top, we added Chunk, our mascot in all of the games from now on. Sorry, Lazy.
It can't be helped.
Yeah, when you hire us, you have me, her, and Chunk.
For your information, we also run a small YouTube channel here called CozyCoupleCoding, and there we talk about game development, how a team can create cool games even though they're just two. And if you're interested in any of that, check us out.
So, on to the next developer.
When I got the build of the game, it was nothing but cubes and balls, which is exactly where I want it. Because at this point in time, the game is kind of just a big hunk of marble that I can chisel away at and give some character. And for those familiar with the Addy Valentine YouTube channel, you'll know that character is what I'm all about. So instead of skinning this circulus prism with something like a barrel or a golf ball or something, I think we can communicate the game's puzzle and rolling mechanics with a little bit more sphere personality. Balls can be especially difficult to make distinct characters around. Pretty much anyone can draw a character in a circle. The market is filled with just generic, simple, boring circle characters. So we're gonna try and make something a little bit more special. Since the game's mechanics are centered around rolling, I can't really break that shape too much. I can't add too many spikes, go with like a hexagon or something. So I really have to fit inside that ball. I could probably squeeze any sort of character or concept into a ball, but I wanted something that made more sense within the context of the game's mechanics. The theme is don't stop moving, so I tried to think of things that die when they stop moving, and the first thing that came to mind was a shark. You could just crumple a shark into a ball, but I didn't want players to just see a ball shark and be like, okay, what's that about? Why is a shark even rolling around in the first place? So another element needed to be added into the character's concept. Recently, I've been messing around with two-toned hemispheres, kind of like a Pokeball, to kind of communicate rolling. I've done this in my own game that I'm working on, Gun Nose, for his tank form. You can see he's got these rolly balls that kind of tell you the direction he's going. So I thought this could work pretty well for our ball character, and maybe with a little fin on top, just enough sharkiness without fully breaking the ball. But this two-tone split had me think of something else fish related, and that was sushi, specifically nigiri. If you look at nigiri, you got this little white ball and the pink on top, and I thought maybe this isn't just a shark, maybe this is a sushi shark, a sashimi. And maybe that can help inform the game's level aesthetic. So I took inspiration from Japanese vending machines, but more specifically pachinko or gacha machines, where the blocks are made to look like little bumpers. And there could be some Japanese style koi and seaweed in the background. So the game isn't just about rolling a ball or some random shark around an abstract cubular void in space, but the player is trying to roll their delicious sashimi out of the sushi pan machine to enjoy a delectable full meal. I had some other plans, like changing the main buttons to look like vending machine order buttons, but I ran out of time. Hopefully the next developer can pick up this shark-shaped ball from where I left it and take it from there.
Hey, I'm Tsea, and I'm the 4th dev in this challenge, and right off the bat, I have a slight issue. You see, after opening up the project, having a bit of a playthrough, and poking around in the code for a while, I'm starting to get a sense that the previous devs might have known what they're doing, so this could get interesting. Looking at the game, it looks like we're dealing with a 2D puzzle game, with the goal of the puzzles being to use these blocks and ramps to get this shark thingy into the exit zone. Now, I have a lot of experience with puzzle games. My main project, The Flux Phenomena, is a 3D puzzle game, where you solve puzzles by swapping object properties around, which you can wishlist on Steam by the way. So with my vast knowledge in puzzle games, the first thing I naturally decided to work on was the graphics. Now, the game at this point looks gorgeous, but as soon as I saw this water zone, I knew I wanted to improve it. You see, right now it's just a blue tinted sprite, but I want to add some ripples along the surface along with some bubbles to make it feel a lot more like water. For the waves, I figured the best way to add them would be through the use of a vertex displacement shader, which is brilliant as I have no idea how to make those. So let's get researching. In order to add these waves, we first need to transform our sprite into a mesh using this monster of a script. We then add a custom shader to our new mesh, which moves the top in sync with this sine wave, which gives us these simple waves. I've got a few parameters to play around with, such as the speed and the height, so I spent some time tweaking them around to bring them to the final result. Next up is adding some bubbles, which I made by taking this lovely fish sprite, cutting off the eye, and then doing some major surgery on the pupil, then converting it into a particle system, and bada bing bada boom, some lovely bubble particles. Alright, the water's done. How long did that take me? Oh, an entire evening. I think it's time we sped things up. When playing the game, I'm noticing a distinct lack of sounds, so I want to take a stab at making some of them. First up, let's add one for placing in objects to give it a little bit more of an impact. Entering and exiting the water needs a satisfying splash, and completing the level feels a little too anticlimactic, so I'll add in a rising tone when you're in the exit zone, followed by the celebratory kazoo when you successfully finish the level. Right, I've dilly-dallied around on other stuff for too long. It's time to make some puzzles. There are currently 5 in the game, and they all introduce new mechanics, so I want to take one of these mechanics and make some puzzles that flesh it out a little bit. And the mechanic I've chosen is the water, which sends the player floating upwards. So after an evening, I have made 3 puzzles, and here they are. Now, I know all their art is missing, and I did mean to add it, but time was escaping quickly, and I wanted to spend my final few hours polishing up the game and fixing some things around the project, like adding some scrolling fish on the main menu and fixing up some UI issues. I also tried to write some music for the game, inspired by simple piano jazz and elevator music, but I couldn't get anything that I liked into a complete enough state in time. So if we ever come back to this project, that's something I definitely want to work on. And that's it. After a couple of hectic days, that's all of the work I've done on the project. I've been asked to give this game a rating out of 10, and at the moment I think it sits at a solid 6.5. The building blocks for the game are there, and the graphics are gorgeous, but it needs more levels in order to turn it into an actual game. Anyway, thank you so much to Lazy for having me on again, and if you want to see more of me, and I mean, who wouldn't, then please do check out my channel and wishlist The Flux Phenomena on Steam. On to the next dev!
Hey, I'm Dominik, and this time apparently I have the honor to finish off this pasta game challenge. I received a pretty solid 2D puzzle game which was very much in a playable state. I just thought the game was a bit static and lacking a bit of depth since there were only 2 different types of blocks to place and there is only so much you could do with them. So one of my main goals was to add a few new objects and create some new levels that make use of them. But since I was the final dev, I thought that polishing may be an even higher priority, so I started out with that. First, on the visual side of things, I started off with a few low-hanging fruits like some basic post-processing and anti-aliasing. I really liked the illustrative art style, but I wanted to unify the different styles a little, so I tried to add a thick outline to all the objects, which along with the existing shadow effect makes the foreground stand out nicely against the background. Next, I added some details to improve game feel, including these tiny squish animations when the player hits an object, some particle effects, and some tweens when placing or removing objects. Speaking of object placement, I changed the control scheme a little bit. The rotate button wasn't ideal since whenever you wanted to rotate your object, you had to move the cursor all the way down to press the button and then back to your intended object position. So I simply changed it to rotate using the mouse wheel. In terms of UI, I did a little overhaul of the object selection buttons, which now use icons instead of text, and I added some slight shadows to some of the other UI elements to make them stand out against different background colors. When looking through the code, I also noticed that the first dev implemented a beautiful undo-redo architecture, so I quickly added 2 buttons to make this feature available to the player. Okay, now it was finally time to add some of the promised new mechanics. Even though we were aiming for a cozy puzzle game, I decided a little more speed and chaos couldn't hurt. So the first block I added was a conveyor belt which accelerates the player in a specific direction. One of the previous devs left this piston/spring in one of the levels, so I turned it into a placeable object, made sure it activates more than once, and made sure it works in all directions when rotated. So now you can shoot your players through the level in an almost pinball-like fashion. Pretty fun stuff. I also found some unused art for breakable blocks, so perfect opportunity. I could have probably used them in more creative ways in the levels, but the main thing I came up with is to use them as barriers, which you first have to throw your player against in order to break and clear. My final addition was a fan block, which creates a wind current that gently pushes the player in a specific direction, as opposed to the immediate force of the piston. With these new mechanics, I spent some time building a handful of new levels. Level design under time pressure is always something I struggle with, but I think they turned out okay. Maybe a bit too hard. I also tried to decorate the backgrounds with some of my previous devs' beautiful art assets that have been unused so far. Finally, to add a little more challenge and strategy to the puzzles, I decided to add a currency system, which was already proposed by the first dev. Each object costs a certain number of credits and you have a fixed budget to spend in each level. It's definitely not perfectly balanced in its current state, but I still think it added some interesting choices for the player. It slowly became time to wrap things up, so I spent the remaining time to add some sound effects where they were still missing and to compose some background music. Ambient tracks aren't really my specialty, so it took me a few attempts to produce something that's not too distracting for a puzzle game. The result is not exactly a banger, but I think it does its job. It's, by the way, the track that's been running in the background here. And that's it from my side. My rating for the game at this point would be a 7 out of 10. I think it's a quick little puzzle game, but I think for a full release it would need a little bit more complexity and content. If you'd like to see more of my work, I have a YouTube channel, and I'm currently working on a cozy city builder called Small Town Architect, in which you can build European style old towns. It's gonna come out next year and you can wishlist it on Steam. Cheers!
This looks a bit different to what I remember. This looks really nice.
Whoa, okay. Okay, that's sick.
The theme was don't stop moving, and the whole point of the game is to make the player stop moving.
Oh yeah.
Successfully ignored.
I spent a lot of time making the water.
I looked through the code for that after you added it in. I was very impressed.
Yeah, same here.
Very much taken out of tutorials and me just figuring it out.
This is the gravitational zone. They made it like it's underwater. Ah, that's so on theme.
Cool. This time we were like right in the middle, and it was like, oh god, what do we do and how do we leave it and let it go after we're working with it? It was painful, but it was interesting to see what it would turn into. So
The cow's back from the previous video.
A way for scoring individual levels, like how many blocks did you use, how much money to spend. Maybe there could be stars that incentivize taking maybe a different route.
I like the little movement on the background layer too. That's sweet. And they picked better colors than I did. I suck at colors.
I wanted a little more chaos in the game, even though it's supposed to be kind of a chill puzzle game, I guess. But I thought it would be a lot easier to create creative levels when there were a bit more chaotic mechanics like physics and stuff like that.
I get the suspicion that this might have not been how I was supposed to solve the level.
I think just more content basically, and we got ourselves a ready to ship game, I would say.